Welcome to Questions from the Closet. I'm Charlie Bird.
And I'm Ben Shalati. Each episode, we discuss a question that we commonly get asked as LGBTQ plus Latter-day Saints.
We're not trying to answer this question or come to a consensus, but simply sharing our perspectives. Today's question is, how can I be supportive as a leader?
Charlie and I are not terribly diverse, and we share many opinions, life experiences. For example, we both have side hustles.
There are some pretty big differences, however. For example, Ben informed me earlier tonight that everything I do is a side hustle.
That's true. You don't have a job.
And he just has one side hustle.
I have a job, and then I have a thing on the side.
I have a job. I'm a therapist.
Yeah, but you're like a full-time therapist.
Yeah, I'm a part-time therapist and a part-time influencer and part-time author, and sometimes I'll do public speaking gigs. I've done dance before. I just take what comes.
That's so fun. I also dance as a side hustle. No, I'm just kidding.
From your tap classes.
Oh my, that was so long ago. Those were great days, the tap days.
Were they?
Yeah, they were so fun. I was
Not for anyone who had to watch you.
No one had to watch it, just class, Charlie. I was actually just thinking yesterday how much fun that was. What a fun time of life. Every Tuesday, I would hang out with Josh and Kelsey, and then Kelsey and I would go to our tap class, and we'd get ice cream after. It was a blast.
So tell us about your side hustle.
I am an audiobook narrator now. Yeah, I was discovered.
You were discovered?
I was at a restaurant in Tucson over Thanksgiving with some of my friends, and then this woman came over, and she said, "I'm so sorry to bother you. I just love your voice. Do you have a podcast?" And I said, "I do, actually." And she's like, "I haven't heard of it, but you should have a podcast. Your voice is so good." I was like, "Oh, thank you." And then she reached out to me later and she was like, "I have a client who wrote a book, and I think you should be the voice of the book." And now I'm recording it. And Sound Guy Mike is doing it with me. He's doing all the audio editing.
That. That's so fun. I can't believe you were discovered.
I know. It's like being discovered as a model, but just for my voice.
It's we don't want your face, but we would like to hear you.
Yeah, it was like Ursula came and was like, "I want your voice."
That's funny.
Yeah. And I finally figured out how to do it because I tend to trip over my words, as you might have heard me from time to time. And I've learned that when I read it, I have to move my hand with the beat. Otherwise I get stuck all the time. So it's I'm awesome. Directing music. It looks really silly in the sound booth, but it sounds great.
Well, we have another great voice on the show tonight. We're happy to be joined by Rick Sorensen.
Hi.
Hello, Rick. Well, tell us a bit about yourself.
So my name is Rick Sorensen. I live in St. George, Utah with my wife. We have 5 children. Our youngest, Luke, is gay. And
people might have heard him on an episode of
they may have
Questions
heard him
from the Closet.
Could have been last week's.
That's right.
I think it was.
And your lovely wife, Tiffany, who apparently hates rainbow flags.
She
Tiffany, if you're listening, I do too. I don't like the design.
let me clarify. Tiffany does not hate rainbow flags. Tiffany hates anything that brings attention to her.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to buy her the biggest diamond rhinestone necklace.
She will never wear it. Actually, you know what though? She's the type of person that would never ever wear that unless you came to visit, and she would make sure it was on the day you were there.
She sounds like my mother. I bought my mother a very large necklace once, and she wears it once a year on Christmas when I'm home. Because she's like, "I don't like people looking at me."
So, anyway, she's great. Luke's great. I currently serve as a first counselor in a stake presidency. I've been in that calling for about 7 years. I was a bishop before that.
7 years? It's been that long?
It's been 7 years.
Wow.
And I am a physician. I work in an emergency department in St. George. I like to ride a mountain bike when I can. And that's me.
All right, great. Well, we're here to talk about how leaders can be supportive of LGBTQ folks, their families, friends, allies, and we just want to get your perspectives, Rick, and see what it's been like for you, what you've seen, what works, what's tough, and let's just get to it.
Okay. So first off, I don't consider myself like a big wig, but being a stake presidency, but being a stake presidency, I do have a voice that maybe a lot of people don't feel like they do, and gives me an opportunity to meet with others and see kind of how things happen, maybe at a higher level than just in my family. Mm-hmm. And I only speak for myself. I don't speak for the church or any other leader, and I certainly don't want to make it sound like there's only one right way, or I do things better, or anything like that. I have a firm testimony that God's hand is in the calling of people, oftentimes that's because someone needs that person to be in that position, and sometimes that person needs to be in that position, and God works through whatever means he has. And so you're going to get different leaders and different abilities and different experiences, and I can only speak to mine. But anyway, a couple things that I guess that I found that I've tried to do as far as being a leader. It's been helpful to have a gay kid. You heard Tiffany talk about kind of the process that we've gone through, and I think that's been a beautiful thing, and it's been extremely helpful to get a different perspective intimately in my own life, and then as I try to relate to others from a leader position, that's been helpful, rather than just stay focused on the things I thought I knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Luke came out when you were stake president, but not when you were bishop.
He came out when I was a counselor in the stake. I'm a counselor.
Yeah, sorry, a counselor in stake presidency.
That's correct.
Yeah. So when you were a bishop, what was kind of your idea of support for LGBTQ folks? Was that even on your radar?
Specifically, I wouldn't say so. I don't know if I knew of any specific person in my ward that was LGBT at the time. However, as a general thing, as a bishop, I mentioned I work in the hospital. I work in an emergency department, and a lot of the time in my job, I get to see the end result of people's bad decisions, and sometimes it can be a little disheartening. Honestly, it's easy to lose a little bit of faith in humanity when you see so much addiction and misbehavior and things like that are common in people that I often see. And so I would, it was kind of this dichotomy. I would say my job is seeing dregs of humanity at times. And yet on Sunday, I'm the biggest cheerleader of everyone I know. Mm-hmm. And that was helpful for me. And so I don't know if I would say I specifically had any skills as a bishop. I didn't certainly think of myself as homophobic. But as a general rule, as a bishop, I felt like I was the biggest cheerleader of any individual in my ward that would come to me, that we would discuss things. And so that I think was helpful for me because it allowed me to then be a cheerleader when I needed to be a cheerleader for my own son, for example.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So as Luke came out and you got more proximity to him and this space, what did you notice needed? Like, what did you notice about support that he and people like him might need?
Yeah, well, so it really, I think, opened my eyes a little bit more to the difficulty that some people have staying in the church, being in the church, participating in the church, feeling marginalized. It's certainly that's a group, but it opened my eyes to more people that might not feel comfortable, people of color in St. George, Utah, or people with mental illness that just struggle and don't feel comfortable or have so much anxiety that church is difficult. And so it opened kind of my eyes wider to that. But as far as Luke coming out, the process that I went through, the first thing, Luke mentioned that first night, he gave us Charlie's book, and I stayed up and read that, and that to me was it was such an emotional thing because it was so relatable. As I read Charlie's book and kind of saw him go through what he went through as an adolescent and kind of tell his story, I saw so much of my own son, and really the emotion I had was I failed him. I wasn't there for him. I can't believe that he went through this for so many years alone, and I have not been there, simply because I was not aware. And that sentiment has really stuck with me about trying to recognize who else might there be that I haven't been there for, that I haven't been aware of. As a leader in the church, we invite everyone to come, and who is there that might not feel that invitation is as sincere as maybe I mean it to be.
Yeah. Well, I guess first of all, it's like a huge honor for me to hear. So thank you. Weirdly, it kind of reminded me of like church discussions on sins of commission versus sins of omission. And it almost reminds me of just like things you didn't know you were doing that aren't,
or didn't know that I wasn't doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of those. Yeah. And there was like this heavy weight that, wow, I really could have been better.
What do you do with that? What do you do with that feeling?
Well, like, hopefully I repent. I recognize that, and then I try to be better. I try to be more aware of that.
So that feeling was important for you.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah, and I think, and I look back at that, and I think that's helpful, for me personally, but I think that's helpful for everyone to recognize things that you don't do wrong. And a lot of times it's hard. It's hard to not get defensive sometimes. I'm frequently misunderstood. I have people often, my wife corrects me a lot, thankfully, but people misunderstand me because I come across as disinterested and gruff and mean, when inside I don't feel like I'm being that way. Or
do you have RBF?
It's more like attitude, not face. But it's hard for me to recognize that at times and say, you know what, I need to be better, or to recognize that maybe what someone is perceiving isn't what I intend to do. And so I think having that kind of introspection at times is helpful. And that's sort of the bigger picture of what happened, realizing what Luke had gone through, is I recognized these sins of omission, sins that I had not done, that I can try to do better.
Yeah. Well, I think with that, it seems like the key is using that information to make changes and having compassion on your former self who didn't know. Because I feel like if you go through your life constantly judging and criticizing yourself for things that you didn't know, that's just going to like pull you into a place where you can't serve and love as much if you don't have that like self-love. And I think one of the things I'm learning through life is that I have to treat myself the way that Christ would treat me. I have to be forgiving and compassionate of the things that I don't get right until I know, and then hold myself to a higher standard of accountability. So I do think there is a lot of grace and compassion for people in that position, and it happens to all of us all the time.
Right.
You don't know until you know, and you can't judge your past ignorance. You can just use the information to become better.
Right. Yeah. So, Rick, what are some things that you have done as a leader to love and support the LGBTQ people in your stake?
Okay, so in our stake, I've got we have a pretty unique stake presidency. I don't know if it's unique or not, but
it has 3 people in it.
It has 3 people in it, but all 3 of us have a child who is LGBTQ somehow, and so it's enabled us to have some meaningful discussions in this arena and others. And so one of the things that we did is invited you two to come to a fireside, and that was the initial fireside of a kind of a bigger process. It was, our theme for that was building Zion, and really what we had discussed and felt like our purpose in our stake was to invite others. I mean in the church we say we invite all people to come to Christ. Visitors welcome is on every building, and we think we are inviting to everyone. But then we realize that there are people that have some difficulty, and our invitation is as sincere as we mean it may not be felt that way. The experience we feel like we're providing at church meetings might not feel as welcoming to some. And so we wanted to bring awareness to that in the effort and attempt to really build Zion, or as you would say, expand its borders.
But I would say that.
You would say that. That would be really good for him. But we thought of it first. No,
I was working on it.
No, but building Zion is really a concept that I find welcoming, and and realizing, where it doesn't feel welcome, what can I do better to really make my invitation feel sincere to everyone, not just to me, but to the person on the receiving end of that. And so we had a series of devotionals with LGBTQ people, you two, and then we had people that have mental health issues and what that's like in church, and people with faith crisis. And so we had a wide variety of people that came and talked and shared, and our intent was to really bring awareness about how welcoming we can be and how much better we can be.
It sounds like gathering information was important for you.
As far as
like we talk about proximity, but like getting information on what people are going through, about
Yes.
what struggles they might be facing.
Yes.
And not so much like it seems like you took a long time to gather information without trying to like be super decisive and this means this, but just like really immerse yourself and say, what can I learn?
Exactly. Yeah. What can I learn from other people? And that was the whole kind of the topic of our devotionals was we just want to listen and learn from others what their experience is like. And on a grander perspective, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a preachy fest, but the way I view this is the atonement itself. I've thought about that my whole life. I grew up thinking that the atonement was this thing that Jesus did for me and for others, and what I can get out of the atonement. Over the last few years, I've thought more about what really was accomplished was what Christ gained through the atonement. I don't think he gained more power to do a thing. He told his disciples, I lay down my life. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. He had the power to do what he needed to do already. But what he gained, as I read Alma, is an understanding. He suffered all the temptations, all the infirmities, all the trials. And he did that so that he may know, according to the flesh, how to succor his people according to the flesh. And I think that to me is one of the greatest miracles of the atonement is Christ himself gained understanding, an infinite understanding of the human condition and anything any of us can go through, that then allows him an ability to use his infinite power to provide empathy and understanding and succor and support.
Mm-hmm. Healing.
And so when I think of the atonement that way, I think, how can I be more like Jesus? And if what he gained was understanding, if I can seek to gain understanding, I can be more like Jesus that way. Mm-hmm. And I certainly am not going to experience, my experience is going to be different than yours or anybody's. But as I ask and try to learn from that type of a conversation and listen to someone's experience and really gain an understanding, I feel like that is being more like Jesus because he understands.
Yeah. A few years ago, President Nelson said that good revelation comes from good information. And I think about that often. And it is kind of, I feel like it's reminiscent of what you're saying here. And being a church leader would be so hard. Like, it's so unique to the area and to the congregation and to like the personal needs and the year. I have a lot of empathy for how difficult that would be to be and have people like come with anything and you be expected to like succor them, right? Like help them. That's hard. That's a lot of pressure. And a lot of times people will say like, what can leaders do? Like as a leader, what can I do to help the LGBTQ people in my congregation or stake? And I just think it's get the information and you have like the stewardship to get the revelation. And I think it's probably going to look different for every single person across the continent, across the globe. It's going to be different. But I think what you're saying right here can solve it. You get that information, you can receive personal revelation for whoever's under your stewardship, and then you act on it.
Yeah, and I really love this principle that Christ-like leadership is trying to learn what it's like to be other people, trying to understand them and see them and hear their stories. We have a newer apostle, Elder Kieran, and I remember very clearly 2 of his general conference talks where he talked about refugees and people who experience abuse. And I don't think he was ever a refugee, or he didn't mention specifically that he had experienced abuse, but he learned from people, heard their stories, and then those were 2 incredibly powerful talks. Like, I just listened to a podcast about someone who experienced abuse as a child. He said he listened to that talk about Elder Kieran dozens of times, and it just healed his soul. And like, that's what Christ-like leadership is, learning what we can about everyone's experience. And that takes a lot of time. I remember one time when I was living in Tucson, I wanted to start the stake sponsored support group. So they had me come present to the board or to the state council about it. So I did that. And then right after I did that, I stayed in the room. Then someone else presented about something like totally different. That was another big problem happening. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's more stuff going on than just Ben Shalati's problems.
Right. And I think just like as a gay member of the church, it's important to realize that leaders aren't solely focused on gay members of the church, right? There's a lot of other issues happening. And I think sometimes when we have our own problem, I hope this sounds okay, but I hope I can make this point, like we think our problem is the biggest problem, right? Where it honestly might not be in a lot of different cases. And I just think it can become really easy to be scared of leaders and like have anxiety or anticipate rejection or like being offended. And I know a lot of people who view church leaders as enemies, and I don't view church leaders as enemies when I've had conversations with them and been open and gracious, even when I've had bad experiences with a few of them. That's always coming from like a place of love, and like they're always trying, So I think that's an important thing for like the LGBTQ person on the ground level, to not go into a relationship with a leader or an interview expecting
a specific outcome,
or being on the defensive or
right.
expecting to not to be viewed as other,
Yeah.
I just don't think that helps.
No, I don't think it is. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of instances where someone had a bad experience with their bishop or their stake president, LGBTQ or whatever else their thing is. And there've been plenty of times when I've spoken to people as a bishop or as a member of the stake presidency who have had those experiences, and I just, all I can do is say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. When in my mind, I'm thinking, how did that person, that bishop, say or do that thing that sounds horrible? I don't have their version of the story. I don't know really what happened. But I also, like you said, I don't think that I've ever met anyone in any church leadership position that isn't trying to come from a place of love and trying to do their best with their experience.
I think to me, it mostly seems like it's people operating from that I didn't know. It's operating from that place of ignorance, and ignorance isn't malice. It's not. It can feel like it.
Right.
It can be devastating when someone who has stewardship over you is working from an ignorant place, but it's not malicious. And so I think it's important to not confuse those two things. And I don't know, that's just a really harsh reality that sometimes people don't know. And until they have that moment of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize what I've been doing for all this time, that
right.
I think that's why it's so harrowing.
Right.
Anyways.
Yeah. So, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, well, I wish my stake president would do this, or I wish my bishop would do this. From your experience, Rick, what keeps people from wanting to, or keeps church leaders from wanting to step into this LGBTQ space and maybe, talk about LGBTQ people in a Fifth Sunday lesson or a fireside, or even mention them organically in a talk?
Yeah. What keeps leaders from doing that? Mm-hmm. Again, I can't speak for all the leaders, but I do think there are some things that sometimes happen. Number one, it might be something as simple as Charlie just said, that they perceive that there are bigger issues that they're juggling, and it just isn't their priority at the moment. And that may be true. There may be some other bigger things that concerned with, that they are privy to, that I'm not. But as far as, there is some hesitancy, I think. A lot of times, leaders are new. I mean, we just called a brand new bishop in our stake, and it's brand new at this. I mean, every bishop is brand new at being a bishop. Every stake president is brand new at being a stake president. And there's a period of trying to get your mind around that and figure out what that means, and you don't want to step out of bounds. And so sometimes different people might feel a little more restricted, that I need to protect the church or the doctrine or whatever that may be, and just operate in this little box that is my perception of what I need to do. And so there's maybe some hesitancy. I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, I got a call from one of our bishops, and he said, there's a girl in our ward who wants to go to the temple. She just graduated from high school. She doesn't want to go on a mission, but she wants to go to the temple. What do I do? How do I? And sincerely, he was coming from a place of, wow, this is different than my experience has been. It's different to have this 18-year-old female want to go to the temple, because usually girls don't go to the temple until they go on a mission or get married or something. So that was kind of where he was coming from, that experience. And really, I just mentioned to him, what a wonderful thing that you have a member of your ward that wants to receive her endowment and make temple covenants. You need to view yourself as a facilitator, not a guardian of those things. And if you feel like she's ready, I mean, that's the next question is does she understand what this is? Is she ready to make these covenants? Will that bless her life? Then do whatever you can to make those things happen and get her to the temple. And if that means, I don't think she's mature enough and we need to wait a year, whatever that is, but it shifts the viewpoint when I, as a leader, I look at that as, what can I do to facilitate and to help someone who has righteous desire, someone who wants to participate, someone who wants to be there, rather than, I think sometimes there's this hesitancy, like I said, that keeps people from talking. And as far as specifically addressing LGBT issues, honestly, there's feedback that I think leaders are often afraid of.
Like feedback from ward and stake members?
Ward and stake members, or other leaders, or even area authorities, or whoever it may be. And so that sometimes be hesitant. I've kind of toned down a little bit of the things that I speak about or do in my stake, because as a counselor, I'm there for my stake president, who has been wonderful. And with our little devotional series, he was phenomenal. On the day that my son was being set apart as a missionary, openly gay at this point in his life, 2 years ago, we had a ward conference, and I had rainbow socks on that day. And we met with the youth, and one of the youth asked, "What's the deal with the rainbow socks?" And I explained to them, this is me showing solidarity with my son, who is a gay member of the church being set apart and leaving on a mission. Because I want everyone to know that I understand how difficult that can be to be in both of those worlds. And I'm here to support and love. And I thought it was a great conversation. My stake president got all kinds of feedback. Several people complained and said, "Why is your counselor promoting immorality? Why do and so that type of feedback from members who, again, are at a different place, I think that can quell some of that and make some people feel really hesitant to speak out or support.
Yeah. It's interesting that you share that specific story because I was talking to my dad on the phone a few days ago, and I went home over Christmas, and on Christmas, my dad he wears rainbow socks all the time, not just at church, but all the time. And so he wore his rainbow socks to church on Christmas Eve, and someone asked him, "Oh, I love your rainbow socks." He said, "Well, I wear them to show that I love and support my gay son." And I was like, "Hello, I'm the gay son." And then my dad later found out that was a person who was had been in the ward for a number of years and was inactive because they didn't like the church's stance on LGBTQ issues, and came that day because it was Christmas. It was Christmas Eve. And when my dad said that, they were like, well, maybe I should come back. And it wasn't that that socks were like showing people to like teaching people to sin or anything, but just showing, hey, we want you here.
Right. My invitation for you to come and be here with us is sincere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think both these stories just nod to a very complex landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like, the landscape between, like, sexual orientation and religion is so complex. And it's pretty new territory. Like, before, not many years ago, it was just like, oh, if you're gay, you leave the church. And that just, like, was the expectation. And so it's, like, kind of unsurprising that people have different viewpoints and different levels of proximity to what it means to be an openly gay missionary. Like 10 years ago, it didn't happen.
Well, maybe like Luke had said, like, give grace to your parents. Give
grace to the leaders, give grace to like where we're at, and like recognize that it is going to be complex, and it's not, I think a lot of people who interact with leaders want it to be really clean.
Right.
Want it to be very, yeah, I guess clean is the best word I can describe for it. Like super pure, like very exactly reminiscent of Christ's love. And like we're humans operating in this super complex social
right
network, and it can be messy. And so like, and I think that's okay. You can have grace and give grace on both sides.
Yeah. You know, as we're talking about like what we wish leaders would do and what they actually do. Like I've talked about this ward in Tucson all the time. I apologize for bringing it up again, but I was the ward mission leader in this ward in Tucson. And so we would talk about Fifth Sunday lessons, and they're like, what should we talk about? And I'm on the ward council. Like, we should talk about loving and supporting LGBTQ members. And it got shot down every time. And yet at the same time, I asked my bishop if I could come out in my talk, and he said, of course. And I mentioned my orientation all the time when I would be teaching, when it came up organically. And that was wonderful and fine and welcomed, and honestly, life-changing for me and many people in the congregation. And so I think we can, like, there are things that we can like want to have happen, which are good, righteous desires. And I think that we can also be grateful for other things that do happen.
I think that the last episode, like your wife and your son, are such a powerful example of how this needs to be a symbiotic relationship. And I really believe that it's not just 100% up to the leader to like fix things or make the LGBTQ person feel included. Like there's an onus on both sides. And I think there's a lot of power in showing up and communicating and being willing to communicate through tricky conversations and accepting imperfect offerings and not criticizing those and coming with like palms open.
Right.
And I would like to see LGBTQ members of the church learn those skills and enter conversations with leaders that way. Because I think in order for people to get the right information to make to get revelation from, like, we have to give it to them. Like, that's just how it is.
And it might not be something that, you know, you hear these great stories about the ward in Tucson. And, you know, we try to make our stake welcoming. But you also hear the stories that someone I just don't feel like my bishop heard me or saw me or understands. And that's, but I agree with what you're saying, but there's also another avenue, and not just to like flank and go around the back door, but there are other avenues to that. There is a ward council. And if you feel like your bishop isn't really at a place where you feel, not necessarily you want them to be, but they're not where you would hope, make an ally with your Relief Society president, with your Elders Quorum president, with your ministering brother. I mean, there's someone else there that can be there for you and amplify your voice and your experience. And, you know, I mean, in a perfect world, if I had an issue, I would go to my ministering brother and say, hey, man, I'm really having a hard time with this. This is where I'm at. And my ministering brother would minister and love me and understand me and then become an advocate with me to my quorum president or whatever, who has a seat on the ward council. So there are ways to roll a snowball and have it get bigger more than just knocking on the door of the stake president.
Yeah. And, you know, as you've been talking, Rick, I realized that a lot of times in my life when I've like wanted my ward to have a lesson on this topic, or I've wanted my stake to give a fireside, like those were my goals. And I think that now I could have more effective goals of just offering people education, or at least opportunities for education. Because if we have this event, then the event is done, and you know, then what next? And perhaps just focusing on education and continued dialogue, for me, would have caused less frustration in the past. And I mean, you were able to do this fireside, and hopefully Charlie and I did okay. It didn't cause too many problems. But
We did get our building burned down.
that was before our fireside came after.
I forgot about that.
There was an arson.
It happened. Our church building literally happened to be burned down like 4 days before you were scheduled to speak at it.
Yes, they took fireside too literally.
It raised a lot of eyebrows for sure.
It was not related to our company. It was a coincidence. But you know, I think that too often I have thought, I wish my leader would do this,
Right.
and then that caused some frustration, and maybe not giving them specific outcomes that I want for them to do, but instead just offering them grace and education.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't matter if there's a fifth Sunday lesson on LGBTQ inclusion if nothing happens. Like, what actually matters is that on the ground level, the 14-year-old who's in the, you know, young men's has someone to talk and understand. Mm-hmm. You know, so like it's very on the ground work. It's like one-on-one ministering, and so I like that.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to you recognize that the majority of, you know, if I'm a new leader in the church, I'm a bishop or whatever it is, like I mentioned, I couldn't say the few years that I was a bishop that I knew specifically any LGBT people in my ward. However, I now know that there were. And so I think it's important to recognize that we're talking about a tone that we want to establish and an understanding and welcoming, knowing that there are going to be people that you don't know are there. And for the most part, I think those people are going to be your youth, because the 27-year-old or the 40-year-old gay member is probably out. May not be, but probably much more likely than the 14-year-old. Who is still struggling through this self-loathing and how do I reconcile this and trying to do this alone or fix it or whatever that may be. And so there are going to be plenty of people in your ward that you just don't know. And so as I look back on my experience, when I had all that regret, what would I have done better is I would have tried to treat everyone as if they were gay or could be, because that shouldn't be different than I treat someone who isn't. I mean, does that make sense? I don't know if that's being clear, but there are going to be people that you don't know are struggling with this, and they're the ones that need to be welcomed and feel comfortable and know that you are there for them, even more so perhaps than others.
This is an individual ministry.
Right.
The best leaders I've had haven't like done anything grandiose or organized anything. They've just listened to me, honestly, and they've asked me questions, and they've spent time like honestly, we moved into our new ward, and like I introduced myself, me and Ryan were like, hey, we're here in the ward, to the bishop, and we went to his office and he talked to us for like 3 hours. And he asked a lot of questions, and it was like a long time. And I was like, wow, this man is busy.
Did you take a bathroom break?
No, we were just so engaged. We didn't need to. And he asked a lot of questions and thought about it, and then had like continued conversations, and it was super meaningful, and it helped us feel seen and acknowledged. And we got to share some of the things we were scared about. And he was able to like speak to those fears in a way that helped us feel reassured. And I think, like, what more would you want? Like, that to me was way bigger than organizing a fireside or doing some sort of like visible like proclamation of inclusivity.
No, I love that was your experience, and maybe I could share a couple of other good experiences that we've had. That reminds me of Tiffany my wife went to a temple recommend interview, I think, with our bishop. He was a brand new bishop in our ward. He had been a youth leader for my son, who during his adolescent time, when he wasn't really into church, he was really a pill, and he didn't go to a lot of the activities, and he was a difficult kid, and so she had her temple recommend interview, and she just said, "I just want to thank you for how kind you've been to our family and to my son," and she felt inspired at the time to let him know, he's gay, and his response was, "I love him. That's great. And if there's anything I can do, let me know." It was just a very welcoming sentiment on a simple conversation, one-on-one conversation with our brand new bishop. My stake president, when my son came out, a mission wasn't in his kind of, that really wasn't even a thing for him at the time. He was like, "I'm not sure, I don't know, whatever." My stake president met with him every couple of months, invited him in just to talk. "I just want to be there for you. I want to hear you and understand you." And that was meaningful. And, I don't know if he did that just because I'm his counselor, but it was a meaningful thing for him to reach out and invite my son to meet with him regularly during that time in his life. When he did decide to go on a mission, our prayers specifically turned to only one thing. I mean, certainly we were grateful that he had decided to go on a mission, and we wanted him to be prepared. But our prayers were specifically for a mission president. And I don't know if we've prayed harder for something than just let him have a mission president that will be a blessing to him. And he had two mission presidents that were phenomenal. His first mission president, as he entered the mission field, it was hard. It was he lived with some elders. It was a hard transition. And his mission president said, "Look, see the mission counselor." And normally a missionary can meet like 8 times or something. I don't know. And he said, "You can meet with the counselor as often as you need, as long as you want, for your entire mission, because I want you to feel that support and have that help." And that was super meaningful to us. His second mission president, near the end of his mission, we were invited to speak with Luke over Zoom. He was over Zoom. We were at the Institute in St. George about his experience as a gay missionary, and his mission president was like, "Yeah, for sure you should do that. You should do that while you're a missionary," and was just super supportive. And so we felt very blessed to have those leaders that reached out and understood and listened and loved. Another one that's not really a leader, but I think as we talk about leaders, any of us can do in our little sphere of influence, whether I'm a leader in the church or not. We have a neighbor who's a fairly elderly guy, and he's been a bishop, and he's been a stake president, he's been a patriarch, and he was our ministering brother. And this was on Tiffany's birthday, so probably about 8 months after Luke had come out. It was Tiffany's birthday, and we'd been somewhere, came home, and Brother Larson, our ministering brother, had left a bouquet of flowers for Tiffany for her birthday, and it was a rainbow bouquet. Not that she does rainbow flags, but it was a rainbow bouquet, and it just said so much. From this guy, you think, oh, he's just an old kind of washed up church leader, ministering brother, but that's not who he was. He was someone who saw us, saw my wife, and understood, and that was perhaps one of the most meaningful gestures that anyone has done, because it communicated so much, and it was simple. And I think simple gestures like that are always helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those beautiful stories, Rick. I know it can be. It's we don't often realize the power that showing love, whether it be in big ways or small ways, can have on other people.
And honestly, the power of prayer. Mm-hmm. You prayed earnestly for something good, so your son would have a good leader, and God provided. And I have felt that incredibly strong in my life. I've prayed for good leaders and I've come across good leaders. And it does take openness and communication and sometimes some creativity. But I don't know, I really believe that God's hand is in our lives. I do.
You know, Rick, I know you love mountain biking. Can you tell us what lessons you've learned as a mountain biker and how that relates to leadership?
Wow, how it relates to leadership? So this is great because Ben has actually been mountain biking with me on several occasions.
Are you good, Ben?
No.
If Charlie had ever accepted an invitation to come mountain biking with me, he would know.
Well, here's the thing. I go once a year with Rick.
This is a similarity and difference.
I've been like
I want to go. That is.
We go all the time, once a year.
Once a year.
all the time, once a year.
We actually went more than once a year this last year.
It's
because
true.
we did biking and pokey when you were coming through town.
Oh, that poke was so good. And the biking was a blast. And I broke the bike.
Okay, so
You broke the bike?
It wasn't my fault.
I love to talk about mountain biking. How does it relate to leadership?
Because I have a way it relates to leadership.
Okay, so I have two things. One of my favorite mountain biking stories is, I don't know if it's really leadership or if it's even relative to our conversation today, but Ben and I were mountain biking and he was new to this, and we were going on a trail that my wife told us not to go on because it was more than his novice skill would warrant. But we went anyway. It was great. And I think Ben described it afterwards as the most terrifying and exhilarating thing he'd ever done. Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Wow.
But there were a couple things we were talking about. One of the things I said at the time is momentum is your friend. And I think I said that a few times. Like when you're going uphill or when you're trying to navigate something, even downhill, you need to have a little momentum as always your friend. And then it was only like 3 weeks later, it was General Conference when President Nelson talked about spiritual momentum.
Henrik was like,
yes,
ahead of the game.
Head of the game. But I think that it's meaningful. I mean, you build on good things. The other thing I would say a mountain biking lesson is that I've learned, and I'm not like a professional mountain biker, but I do ride trails that I wouldn't have ridden a few years ago. And one of the ways that I do that is ride with people who have been on that trail and know the way to go and know where to navigate. And, you know, there are certain features that I would never, ever take my bike down because it looks horrifying. But when you go with someone who's been there, someone who knows the trail, and follow them in and just ride right behind them, it then becomes, you can do that. You realize you can do that. You trust them, you trust your bike, you trust your own skill, and you trust where they're taking you. And you get through that, and it becomes an exhilarating, enjoyable, awesome thing that then you can do. And so I think that kind of relates to looking for people who have experience that you don't have, that have walked a path, that understand a little better. And that goes back to what we were talking about is listening and learning and follow their lead and let other people guide you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And very similar lesson to what you just shared, because I'm a novice and Rick is an expert, and I'm a very risk-averse person, so I don't like to be in physical danger. So Rick taught me like how to, you know, ride with the bike, and like when you go down, like how to like what would you call that? I don't know.
Put your seat back.
Yeah.
Drop your weight.
Like how to move my seat up and down. Yeah. And so I don't get flung off the bike. And so that was really helpful. And I remember we went down this drop. I must have been like 7 feet. I don't know. Was it 7?
It was like 2 or 3.
Okay. Well,
seven works.
It felt huge.
It did. It's very steep.
Yeah. And I saw Rick go down. I was like, holy shoot. I was like, I guess I could do it. He taught me how to do it. And it was terrifying and exhilarating and a lot of fun. And then sometimes Rick would go faster than me, and I would go a lot faster than I would have on my own because I knew I could do it because I just seen him do it. Then other times I was too scared and I would still slow down and just go my own pace, which was also fine. But I think a good leader can show someone how to go through these tough moments, like how to go through terrain they've never been on before. And for a lot of people, the LGBTQ space is a new space. And so a good leader can say, this might be scary. I have gotten into the space already. I've talked to people. I've learned from them. I've heard from them. Let me bring you into this space that might seem scary so that we can have this horrifyingly exhilarating experience.
You did that for me, Ben.
I did. Tell me more, Charlie.
Well, you know this.
I know.
Like when I came out, and I feel like I've done that for you too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty cool how we can all just help each other in different phases.
Yep.
It's like hearts are knit together.
Don't go getting all gospel.
Gospel-y.
This isn't a religious podcast.
Yeah. Rick, if you were to like say a prayer for, your son's bishop now, what would you want for him?
For my son's bishop, like here in Provo,
Yeah.
I would pray first and foremost that he is supported and sustained by the Lord, by his counselors, that he understands there are so many people who love him and support him. I would want him to listen to and love my son, and everyone in his ward, to get to know them on a level that allows him to really understand them and build not just a relationship with him and them, but a community.
Love that. Thank you, Rick.
I'm grateful for church leaders. I really am. It's pretty amazing. Like, it's an unpaid ministry. It's a lot of volunteer. It's a lot of hours. And I'm especially grateful for the ones who like actually want to see and view what you were talking earlier. And it's something I've thought about a lot, of just like the church is a refuge, not a fortress. And I think if in leadership we can show in any ways that we lead that we are a refuge here, we're not a fortress, then I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. Can I share a quick 2 stories about my current bishop? And these aren't LGBTQ related stories. But he gave a Fifth Sunday lesson a number of months back. And at the end of the lesson, he said, I'm going to say the closing prayer, and I'm going to give the best gift I can give you by praying for you right now. And he got really emotional and prayed for all of us. And it was really beautiful. Like, I just felt that he loved and cared about us. And then I was asked to teach or facilitate a self-reliance class. We were doing this big initiative, a bunch of self-reliance classes in the ward, and I was asked to teach one of them. And I was salty about it because I already had 2 other callings, and this would be at least 2 hours of my Sunday, and I didn't want to give up 2 hours of my Sunday, and I was annoyed. But I did it, because I was asked to do it, so I did it. And those 12 weeks became life-changing for me. Like, it was absolutely wonderful. I learned a ton. I got to know people in my ward I hadn't spent time with before who were just absolutely amazing. And I'm just, like you said, I'm really grateful for leaders and the way they have shown me Christ-like love and the ways that they have invited me to grow and expand and change. And because of my leaders, I am a better person than I would have been without them. Yeah. Any final thoughts, Rick?
Yeah. As I think about kind of what we've been talking about and where I come from of trying to invite, our invitation, I look at I love the story of the body of Christ, that the scripture about the body of Christ and how we're all different. There's eyes and hands and feet and everyone with a different thing. And to me that is what we ought to focus a little more on. My personal righteousness and obedience, that's the thing I do with me and God. But love and charity and caring and ministering is something that I can't do alone. That's something I do in a community. And I think that concept of having the whole body of Christ, to me, is important. And at times I've had some difficulty as a leader knowing what I'm asking of people. I ask people to stay when it's hard. I ask people who don't feel welcome to remain. I ask people who doubt their testimony to hold on longer and still be here with me. Because if everyone who doesn't feel totally comfortable leaves, that leaves me in an echo chamber with just the people like me. And it's just the hands, right? And so I found that sometimes a little bit stressful and hard to know that I'm asking people to do a hard thing. But I find that important for me because I need that. I feel like I need to have that community, to have ears and the eyes and the nose and the hands and the feet, and everyone there who aren't the same and who have different talents and different interests and different orientations and different whatever it is, different experience, and I want them all there, and I want all of their voices to help me be better. And to me, that's a view that I think has helped quite a bit.
Well, Rick, thank you for your faith and wisdom and love and friendship. We're just thrilled to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. If you have enjoyed this or other episodes, please consider leaving a review, following us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Questions from the Closet, or sharing this podcast with someone you love. And as always, please remember that we do not represent the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Brigham Young University. We're not trying to be prescriptive or tell anyone what to think or what to do.
You heard 3 perspectives, and there are many, many more. We encourage you to listen to other voices and hear a wide variety of experiences. If you would like to submit a question or share a comment about today's episode, you can email us at questionsfromthecloset@gmail.com.
Until next time.